Kevin, if you want to go.
Oh, I think she froze up a little bit. Next slide, Haley.
Oh, no. Yes, please.
All right, slide 2 is all you.
I'm going to have to turn off the key. Okay, if I keep freezing, I will turn off the camera. It almost looks like you are all frozen, so I might have to. Yeah. Okay, let me try that. Okay. Um, can you hear me now, Alicia? Yes. All right. That's what I get for living in the middle of nowhere. Okay. So if everyone the data that you have in the chat, that will just kind of help us go from here. We are planning on doing a very basic layout of the LMRs and data, but if the experience is a little bit more than that, we'd love to see that as well. So as you work on that, just a reminder for those who have joined since, we are recording this session so that you can watch it later if you really enjoy listening to our voices. So please remain on mute, and any questions can be asked throughout the presentation in the chat or save them until the end. We will save at least 10 minutes at the end for any questions you may have, suggestions, comments, anything like that. So, and as people join, I'm sure they'll miss some of that as well. Thank you, Alicia, for letting people in. And Kevin, if you want to go to the next slide. So I am Haley Porter. I'm the Associate Project Manager and Research Analyst. I joined WIN about 2 years ago and joined the data team about a year ago and have been really focused on the LMRs in the last year, which I've really enjoyed analyzing data. My experience is in nonprofits, so I really haven't had a ton of experience doing that beforehand, and I've always loved numbers, and so this has been a great mix. Kevin, if you want to introduce yourself next.
Great, thanks, Haley. I'm Kevin Kranick. I'm one of 2 economic research managers here at WIN. Over the last 2.5 years that I've been with the organization, I've transitioned from an economic research analyst to a senior research analyst and now economic research manager. Prior to my time at WIN, I spent 8 years with a healthcare consultancy working in the patient experience and satisfaction space, and that was primarily focused on utilizing surveys and government databases to establish benchmarking and other performance metrics. Alicia.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Albrecht. I'm the communications manager for WIN. So just happy to run the back end, I guess, of this presentation and talk about some exciting stuff coming up with the labor market reports from WIN. Yeah, that's me. And I just want to say right now I'm in Lansing kicking off a digital equity and inclusion grant that WIN received. So very timely stuff as we talk about labor market and data. So I'll kick it back to you, Haley.
Well, actually, Kevin, yes, please go through. And Alicia, these are your slides for the WIN overview.
Yes, correct. Perfect. So all of you here were invited to this free webinar series. Once again, it is being recorded and we will post it afterwards. And then just remember that this builds on top of the next 2 series. So we will meet in person in June. Happy to host at SEMCA in Taylor. And then, of course, we will do the 3rd session virtually or remotely in September. So all kind of building off of each other, or you can just attend one or another. You don't have to attend all. Kevin, if you want to go to the next slide. So many of you probably know about WIN, but we are always happy to onboard you at WIN. If you are like, I just need to know more information about WIN does, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to meet with you virtually or in person, and kind of give you the lay of the land of who WIN is, what we do, and go deeper into the programs and the areas that we focus on. But for today, I just want to do the quick elevator spiel. WIN is obviously the Workforce Intelligence Network. We are a division of SEMCA, or SEMCA Michigan Works. Our board is made up of 9 community colleges and 7 Michigan Works agencies. So we secure the state and the federal grants, foundation funding, and then we really push it to our board to be almost like the boots on the ground, really connecting with the career seekers. But as we step back into the WIN role, we really focus on the labor market intelligence to drive the innovations we seek within our grant applications, and then obviously drive the innovations that are based on the labor market and the occupation groups as well. So next slide, Kevin. So WIN is focused on 3 pillars: research, engagement, and solutions. So obviously the research is what you're here for, the labor market intelligence. Engagement is a huge portion of what our board does and what all of you do as the boots on the ground. And then the solutions is us coming together, building those solutions or extending them, growing them, such as maybe registered apprenticeships, pre-apprenticeships, but then also really reaching across the table with industry as well. And then all of those research engagement solutions obviously reflect around outreach and communication strategies as well. Next slide. So here's just a little look of what counties we serve. WIN is a 19-county region, again, serving the 7 Michigan Works agencies within that region, and then the 9 community colleges. So you can see all of the counties that we serve and represent. And then the shading is just the difference of region, like prosperities as well. So that is all I have. Pass it back over to Haley.
Thanks, Alicia. Before we go any farther, are we having any issues with an echo? I don't hear anything when others speak, so hopefully, Barbara, you were able to get that figured out. Okay. So, Kevin, go ahead and go on to the next. As we are focusing on the labor market report, which is built with the labor market information. So labor market information, or LMI is what I end up usually calling it, is just quantitative and qualitative data related to employment and workforce. Brings in things such as the size and composition of the labor market, including labor demand, supply dynamics, industry and occupational trends, and workforce characteristics, like categories between industry, occupation, or educational attainment. So we use this data for the labor market reports, LMRs, with the purpose to equip individuals and organizations with the insights for informed decision-making, to look at career planning, education, training programs, job searches, workforce development initiatives. There's a lot of different uses that you can use these for. Kevin, go ahead and go on to the next slide, please. So each annual report the annual reports include an analysis of 5 to 11 key occupation groups that were created with the board input. 19 county regions, some are combined with other counties. The state of Michigan overall, the city of Detroit pulled out from Wayne County, and then the WIN region. So we also do the city of Detroit and the WIN region every quarter. And those are, I guess that's the next slide. Go ahead on to the next slide. So the quarterly reports come out after, like, Q1 will come out in Q2. And then the the state of Michigan report and the county reports just come out in usually, the hope is end of Q1, beginning of Q2. And they are all put on our our website and promoted as soon as they're out. So hopefully they're pretty quick and timely, depending on the data team's other projects. Next slide. So the data and analysis of this, we use a unique analysis combining traditional LMI and real-time data. Textualized analysis using input from partners, employers, industry experts. We originally, when creating these, used board input and what their needs were, and that's how the original report was created, and then have used their input since then to kind of build off of that and try and always make it better for those that are looking at it. We analyze the trends over time for the custom occupation groups. Again, those were built by WIN and WIN partners, and looking at annual changes, quarterly changes. We'll kind of go into that further in the presentation. Next slide. So for each occupation group, we break that out by current employment demographics. This is an example of one of the pages. Job postings, in-demand skills, wages, required education, to lay out the information for that occupation group for that location or region. Next slide. So the key findings graphics are great tools for discussions and presentations. Data points can be broad or keep the info relevant for your audience, depending on what you are sharing. And always feel free to ask questions of the data team. We work all the time on this data. And we are also very passionate about it. Like I said, I really enjoy this. Because we do not have the 2024 reports out yet, can we hit that link real quick, Kevin? Hopefully it won't mess up your presentation sharing.
I'm
We'll
guessing
go into
probably
these.
did not open the screen share, correct? I'm going to need to adjust that. I'm seeing Alicia confirm. Okay,
correct.
give me one second. And we'll jump over to the other window here.
So we're just going to take a look at these briefly, but we will go into these further at the end of the presentation. Like I said, this is 2023s because we have not put out 2024s yet. And this is a link to the state of Michigan's annual report. But this is what 2023s look like. And if you want to just flip through, and we'll kind of go over some of these different points further in this presentation, and then also in the following presentations.
So you can see too in the table of contents, in the first page, it goes over all the occupation groups that we'll dive back into within these reports.
Excellent. We'll get back to the presentation here.
Sorry for all the work, Kevin.
No, you're fine.
So hopefully everyone has seen those reports on the call. If not, we will obviously share the link afterwards as well. So no worries.
All right, if you will go and then Alicia, your slides.
Awesome. So we have a new look. We launched this last year for the quarterly reports. So the City of Detroit and the WIN region have really like this new kind of vibrant, modern, but also really just like a magazine feel. We feel like we put so much time and effort into these reports that we want you guys to showcase them and share them and, you know, print them out and hand them to employers or even career seekers, whatever it may be. So this is kind of the new magazine look for these two reports as we are building the annual reports right now for 2024. Each county, again, has its own report for the annuals. And then we have the City of Detroit and the WIN region report as well. So there's a lot of work that goes into pulling all that data, putting it into these magazine or booklet feel booklet documents, and then obviously promoting it and sharing it as well. And we'll talk about how you can do that later. Next slide. Great. So distribution of these labor market reports. The annual usually comes out in May. Last year, we were able to launch it in April. So we're really trying to get it out there as soon as we can for you guys. It's just about 21 different reports that we have to compile data for. So it's just a lot of work for the whole team here, but we're really excited when we get it published. So of course, the e-newsletter is the best way to get it right to your doorstep, I guess. In a sense. And then once we push it out, we'll put it on the website. It will have a blog about it. We'll send it out through the e-newsletter. And then we also do a social media post about the labor market reports being live or published. And then throughout the year, we constantly go back to the labor market data and we do presentations at, school groups for counselors or educators, CEO groups. We are constantly talking about labor market and why understanding the intelligence behind it is really, really critical to make the impact and also kind of lead us in the direction of where we need to go in the field and in our region. Next slide.
All right, and I believe this is where I'm going to take over for a few slides. So when we are developing the labor market reports, there are actually several resources that we use. I would say a majority of the data from the labor market reports is derived from Lightcast. And for those who aren't familiar, Lightcast is what we refer to as an economic modeling service. There are several other economic modeling service agencies around the country. We've demoed some others, but we're very happy with Lightcast and the data that they are able to aggregate for us. So with that being said, a lot of that data is aggregated from other resources that are still publicly available. So one of those examples would be accessing census data, accessing publicly available job postings data, but Lightcast does an excellent job of bringing that all into one place, which allows us to deliver these reports in the timeline that we do. So a few key notes about understanding the labor market reports is that each labor market report is broken down by occupation groups. So for the WIN region and the city of Detroit, we have 11 different occupation groups within those reports that we showed you. And within those occupation groupings, we use occupations that are based on SOC method, which is the standard occupational codes. So the really nice thing about the WIN reports that we build and share with you is that all of those occupations were employer validated. So early on in the days of WIN, we met with a lot of different employers and they gave us the feedback necessary in order to build out these occupation groups to ensure that they were representative of the jobs that are most in demand and most representative of those occupation groupings for the employers themselves. So a lot of the work that we do revolves around building content and releasing material like the career profiles that WIN is well known for, as well as of course, the quarterly and annual reports that we're speaking to, knowing that that is very high value to the employers themselves helps to connect on the same level. So the SOC codes can be 2 or 6 digits. We use the 6-digit codes because they are much more granular in nature, so they're more specific to the actual job titles that you would see. And that's another common misconception, is that when we are building these labor market reports, one of the pages that you will find within them are the wage tables. So those wage tables will list the top 10 occupations. However, you may find difficulty matching an occupation to an actual job title. And again, that goes back to the difference between how the government measures employment and occupation and how individual employers are hiring for those occupations. So there's a little bit of groundwork that goes in between, but it is, again, very representative of the wage opportunities and the credentialing opportunities that are available to a job seeker. So this is also different from another coding system you may be familiar with, which is NAICS, the North American Industrial Classification System. And so again, the key difference and the reason WIN chooses to use SOC method versus the NAICS method is that within NAICS, you may have, one example provided here is an electrician who works in construction or manufacturing. So the SOC method is much more granular in nature and allows us to build a more refined report that gives better information relative to the occupations themselves. Some basic metrics that we measure in the labor market reports are employment, unemployment, labor force, and unemployment rate. So some very basic definitions for those who don't already know. People with jobs are employed, pretty straightforward. People who are jobless, looking for a job, and this last part is very key, available for work. Those people comprise the unemployed group. So when we think about unemployment, there's a few nuances to consider, which is that there may be a grouping of individuals who are simply not looking for work. They might be unemployed, but if they are not interested in looking for work, then they do not comprise the unemployment group. The labor force then is made up of the unemployed and the unemployed. So when we consider the total labor force, especially relative to the overall population, that's a common metric that's deployed in labor market reports. It also happens to be a very common metric that you might hear in the news. The labor force is excluding those who are not actively looking for work. So when we think about the labor force, we're only thinking about those who meet the definitions above. People who are neither employed nor unemployed are not in the labor force. And therefore, the unemployment rate is the number of unemployed divided by the total number of people represented in the labor force. So pretty basic definitions, very easy to latch onto. Again, we'll provide these slides at the end of the presentation today, as well as the recording. And then we also wanted to provide some definitions regarding job openings, job postings. There does tend to be a lot of confusion. I know when I first started at WIN and workforce data was somewhat new to me, it took me a little bit to latch onto the various definitions and have a better understanding. So job postings can represent the ceiling of demand for a job in your region, but only if employers are actively advertising online. I mentioned that one of the ways that Lightcast aggregates data for us is that they will scrape online job postings both from employer websites as well as common job boards that you all may be familiar with, like Indeed.com. So if those postings are not available online, then of course they would not be included in the calculation. However, I think in this day and age, most employers recognize that doing things online is the most efficient and effective way to get the word out that you are hiring for a position. So we feel that the job postings data is very accurate. Job openings, in contrast, take a more conservative approach to demand, accounting for job growth and estimating replacement needs for workers who change careers or retire. So it's likely that the true demand for a job is somewhere between job postings and job openings. Now, to get even one level further into this, when WIN utilizes job postings data, there are two different metrics provided. There are the total job postings, and then there are the unique job postings. So that's a very key difference as well, because you may have an employer who has a job posting for, let's say, 20 different positions. If it's a larger organization, for various reasons, as many of you can imagine, that job posting may get pulled. Maybe they didn't have any qualified candidates. Maybe they didn't find the right type of individual that was a good fit for the organization. Perhaps they found that the position was no longer needed. So for a number of reasons, we use unique job postings so that we're not measuring duplicate job postings or repostings in that fashion. Job postings are released on the internet by companies hoping to attract applicants. Of course, we spoke about that a little bit, whereas job openings are a measure of demand that takes into account the actual growth and estimated replacement needs. So that's a little bit more context as to why and how we differentiate between postings and openings, and why we also have the title of the slide, postings versus jobs, indicating an opening is not a job. It does not necessarily mean that the company will hire for that. There are a multitude of reasons. as I mentioned, why one may not equate to the other. And then we have some helpful charts here to also illustrate the difference in quarterly postings in a time series data chart versus annual employment. So whereas there's a lot more volatility in the quarterly postings data compared with annual employment, that can be an indicator of how those two differences stack up over time when you measure the two of them against each other. So a few more definitions. I know I spoke briefly about the standard occupational classifications. That is a system used to categorize all occupations within the workforce. And again, you're going to see some nuance between the labeling system that the government uses within SOC versus the actual job titles that you might see on a job board. And again, that's why we rely on an economic modeling service like Lightcast in order to make those distinctions for us. So within the occupation groups that we use for labor market reports, you'll see these in the quarterly reports and as well as the annual reports for the state of Michigan, the WIN region overall, and the city of Detroit. There are 11 of them. For all of the county level reports that you'll see published when we do the annual report releases, there are typically only 5, the 5 most in-demand occupation groups. So the 11 that we use, again, these were distilled down based on employer feedback. We have customer service, healthcare, business and finance, transportation, distribution and logistics, energy, IT, skilled trades, education, agriculture, engineering and design, and construction. We also do a breakdown of entry-level jobs, which we characterize as those that require 2 or fewer years of experience indicated by the job posting itself. And then I think we're kicking it back over to Haley, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent.
So we're going to break down the report. Sorry, I don't know I can't clear my throat. Based on just the different charts, the overall theme of the reports, and going more in depth so that you can use those already published reports in the next few months. And then from there, at the next presentation, we will go into them even deeper, but this should help you with the basic analysis of the reports from now until then. Go ahead into the next one. All of the data that we're using is Q3 2024 WIN region, LMRs from the report that was printed or published in January. So this is the local area unemployment statistics, LAUS, which is publicly available employment and unemployment statistics in Michigan. I really like this resource. It's free to use. It's very easy to pull the different data because it is only by region, area type, area, year, period type, and period. So it's if you go to the link, Kevin, I guess you don't have to. I know it's a pain. But if you're ever interested in looking up this data for your specific area, or you're just curious about different areas, this is very easy data to pull. And then you can do it by all of these specific things to understand labor force, employment, unemployment rate for any given period of time. So you can pull it separately by month. You can put months together for a year, quarter, whatever you need to analyze the data. So the next slide is what there we go. So it's one of the charts we use or we create using this data. It's very interesting to look at all of these charts because you can definitely see 2020. Unfortunately, COVID did change. Oh my goodness. One second. I'm going to put myself on mute. Sorry about that. So you can see the unemployment rate drastically increased in 2020 for every region. And then you can also see the labor force usually remains steady to some extent. And then the unemployment drops as well. Okay, so and now the numbers are slowly going back to where they were before, or even getting better than what they were before COVID. This is another chart that shows those numbers. We like to break it out by um, numbers, and then also the quarters. So the previous 5 quarters. It's interesting to see in the quarters the dramatic difference between all of these numbers. They tend to jump from quarter to quarter. Sometimes you see the summer employment with students and different things like that. And then sometimes you see a decrease within the colder months around the holidays. Also, it's interesting to look at the quarterly numbers compared to the annual, because there's a lot bigger of a change in the quarterly numbers than there is in the annual numbers, like Kevin mentioned. So these are all provided from Laos data. Kevin, go ahead and to the next one. So the next data source we use is Lightcast, like Kevin mentioned. These numbers are released monthly. They usually are a 2-week lag, which is why sometimes our reports are a little bit longer, as well as Laos is a little bit a month later. We don't receive these numbers right away, but Lightcast updates and cleans some of the past estimates, so they may change. They're available for state, counties, MSAs, and cities. Some of the smaller areas don't have as much data, so they need to be combined with other areas. And then, like Kevin mentioned, Indeed, Monster, Michigan Talent Connect, and more are used in the Lightcast numbers. So we use this data for Kevin. Go ahead and advance the slide. Okay, sorry. I don't know if my computer is lagging, so I do apologize if there's a little bit of a wait. I don't want to start talking about the next slide if I don't see it change, and I think there's been a lag there. So Lightcast data flows, we use a lot of that in our LMRs. The job posting data includes the total and unique postings, and we always use unique, like Kevin spoke of. We use the top occupations, postings by industry, top posting employers, top posted cities, skills are broken down into software, soft skills, specialized skills, tech, and many more like that. And then qualifications like certificates, degrees, those kind of things. So this is a chart used or combined from one of the Lightcast polls. We can see the occupations, the top posted occupations have lately been registered nurses for almost all locations. And then total postings compared to the unique postings, and the huge difference in that. And this was pulled for quarterly data. So go ahead, Kevin. So this chart compares job postings by quarter. And the huge difference that I was talking about previously is also for the postings. So you can see the drop in postings in Q4 for this location, which I believe is Wynn region, and then how it slowly creeps up. Some of the postings have gone down a little bit from last year, or from 2023, sorry. And so are slowly making their way up a little bit. So this is kind of what we're seeing for most locations or regions that we're polling. So this is just another example of Lightcast data. Go ahead, Kevin, to the next slide. So other available information for Lightcast is the median posting duration. You can see how long that posting was posted in comparison to the regional average, the posting intensity, postings by region, and job posting samples, and then job postings versus hires and job titles. And these are some of the charts that pulled directly from Lightcast, so you can see what the data looks like when you're actually pulling it from Lightcast. Go ahead and go to the next slide. This is another example of one of the charts that we use Lightcast data. I really like these ones because it's job posting by city, so you can clearly see, like the larger cities and how many postings they do. These are also quarterly WIN region images. So yeah, just another one. Go ahead and on to the next. So there are some limitations in Lightcast. One of the reasons we use so many different data sources is to kind of avoid the limitations or work around them. So we want to provide the best data possible. So it isn't an exam science. The labor market data from Lightcast relies on models and estimations, which may not always capture the full complexity of what is going on in the workforce. There are gaps. Certain occupations, especially in industries where online job postings aren't common, may be underrepresented. We have been working around that too with other projects of just deciding what jobs go into what occupations and how to categorize different jobs and pull the data. And then regional data constraints. The smaller rural regions may have limited data availability, like I spoke of earlier, and reducing the precision and reliability of the insights. Go ahead on to the next slide. So here's more data that we use and how we present it. So the occupations, like we spoke of earlier, those are all broken out by the number of postings for Q3 2024 for the WIN region, and then the in-demand education levels. Another limitation is not all postings on, Indeed and all of those online websites are post education that they would prefer. So we get a lot of data in the no education listed. So, for this one, it was 44% of the postings did not put any education. That doesn't mean that they necessarily don't want it. There's could be different reasons for that, but it does limit the data, what someone is looking for in that occupation. And then you can see the high school or GED, associates, bachelor's, master's, and PhD. So we do use this for the entire region of the LMR, but also for the individual occupations. Go ahead and go on to the next slide. So this is more a top job posted job. So we do the top 20. And then also based on what kind of education they prefer. So as you can see, registered nurses, like I said, is usually the top 1 or 2. And just their, sorry, I clicked out of the screen. Their, what they would like is bachelor's. Also the entry level, which we spoke of 0 to 2 years. And again, registered nurses is right at the top for having the most postings. And this one, theirs is an bachelor's degree. The colors changed based on the charts. So just kind of breaks it down based on the top posted and the top entry level. If you are a data nerd like me, you can spend a lot of time just looking at these charts and comparing. So, Kevin, go ahead and go on to the next slide. So we already kind of went over this. Each report area focuses on different occupations. The state of Michigan and Wynn region both have the 11 occupations, while the majority of the others have just 5 that they focus on. And then the majority of that data is pulled from Lightcast. So we'll kind of look at the different data pulled in the next few slides for just the individual occupations. Go ahead and go on to the next one. Yeah. So we like to look at the demographics of that occupation. This is agriculture. This is a pretty usual one for agriculture, less women than men. Breaking down the race and ethnicity demographics. We pull out a few. These are not all the numbers. We just don't have the space to evaluate all of the numbers for the demographics. So we try and pull out the larger percentages, as well as the worker age demographics. We do to combine some of the numbers from Lightcast to do these groupings and look at, how many in the 14 to 24 comparison to the age 55 plus, looking at the retirement numbers. So again, there's a lot of information you can gain from looking at these and comparing them. Almost every recommendation, every LMR is to look at increase the individuals and of the people coming in and people that they're hiring. Go ahead on to the next slide. So we pulled the top posted occupation or top posted jobs for each occupation, looking at this one is agriculture, and then their 10th percentile wages, 25th median wages, which is the number we usually use, 75th and 90th percentile. There's also the occupation code, just if you want to look those up online or anything like that for more information. So like for agriculture, the sales representatives, wholesale manufacturing, technical and specific scientific products are the top posted job, and then their wage is quite high with 59.74. And you can see based on like animal caretakers, $14.31. So the range is quite high, quite long for this. Natural science managers are $59.50. So, some can be very high, some can be very low. So yeah, looking at these charts for each occupation. And then there's also a little bit more data, and we evaluate the data for each of these charts within the LMR. So it's not just chart after chart. Go ahead, Kevin, to the next slide. We also look at in-demand technical skills, foundational skills, certificates, which I spoke of earlier, education level, the top posting employers within that region, and then the top postings by city of that region. And then on to the next slide. So that's all the majority of the Lightcast data that is pulled. We also use census data. So there's a lot of different things that go into the census data. It's not just their 10-year when they track everyone down, coming to everyone's doors. So the census data is also another fun one to look at. It's free data to pull, and you can basically look up anything from there, which is very interesting. We do use that. Oh, there are some limitations. So Kevin, if you'll go to the next slide. There's a time lag because of the 5 and 10 years that they go about contacting people. Then there's the other surveys like the American Community Survey, which we'll go over next, provide estimates, but it's may have some sampling variability. There's limited employment and economic data, so that's why we use Lightcast. The census provides more data on individuals, a little bit on workforce and industry data, but lacks anything on the job role or skill specific information. And then it does not capture real-time labor market changes or emerging industries. So some of their data is, because of something like COVID, where it's been such a huge change, it's not going to catch up to those kind of differences in information as quickly as others like Lightcast. On to the next slide. So that lack of real-time data and limited context for social and policy analysis. So, it doesn't have really explanations, just has the numbers. So go ahead on to the next slide. But it is, again, another fun one to look at when you have free time. So then the American Community Survey does have data in the census data. If you pulled that, this is more the 1-year estimates or the 5-year estimates. There's a larger sampling size error with the 5-year, with the 1 year, and it's more precise than the 1 year. So there is a link here to when to use 1 to 5 year estimates, which you can take a look at too at a later time. Next slide. So it's a nationwide survey. It collects information like race, age, race, income, commute time, home value, veteran status, and other data. It produces a population and housing information every year instead of the 10 years, but it reaches about 3.5 million housing unit addresses are selected annually. So it's not everyone like the census. Next slide. So again, this is just the differences between the census and the American Community Survey. Because we do use data every year, most of this information we pull is the American Community Survey data, but it can all be found on census.gov. So this kind of explains the different data pulls from there. And the next slide is how we use that information. Go ahead, Kevin. So the most recent census year for the Q3 2024 report we pulled was 2022. So this information, you can see we break it down by the entire labor force, the employment, unemployment, and unemployment rates, but they're also their demographics, their race and ethnicity, and it kind of shows the percentages, well, and then a percentage of unemployment rate. And so breaking it down for this data, and kind of you can see where, the lower numbers 16 and 19, their numbers are different than Lightcast. So the age groups get broken up a little bit differently. But yeah, this is how we use it in the LMR. Go ahead, Kevin, onto the next slide. We also break it up a little bit more to look at the overall population of the region that we're focusing on. So for this one, again, was WIN region, 50.7% are female, 49.3% are male. Looking at the breakdown of race and of age demographics again. So you can use those numbers to compare two workforce numbers, which is also pretty interesting to compare those. And then these are for you, Kevin.
Awesome. Thanks again, Haley. For those who didn't notice, Haley was certainly doing the heavy lift for this presentation. She made the rest of our jobs very easy. So thank you, Haley, for handling all of those slides. Great information for everyone. But again, we really want this presentation to be an introduction where it would be so helpful, especially going into that next meeting that we're going to be hosting. We certainly hope we'll get a lot of you back for meeting series number 2. If you have a chance to review some of these reports in depth to get a better understanding for the flow and the feel of what we do and why we do it, hopefully this presentation will leave you with a little bit more to be desired about the more in-depth breakdown that we will provide in that second video series. But again, great job, Haley. One of the other components to the labor market reports are the commuting pattern data. So historically, WIN has also done commuting pattern reports for each of the 19 counties in the WIN region, but we also provide some of that data, albeit at a lower level, within the labor market reports themselves. So if you wanted to play around with this data resource, you can access it using I believe the URL is census.onthemap.gov or .org, but you can also just search on the map within any search engine that you prefer, and it should be the top link that pops up. Now, the website, I will admit, is not the easiest to use. It took me a little bit of training when I was first getting used to this labor market data and being able to navigate what we are trying to pull from the website and understanding the why. And that's another key component to data analytics, is understanding the why of the data that you're using. But getting back to the on the map data specifically, the commuting pattern data, it's very helpful for employers to understand, and that's a big reason why we develop these reports, is we also want to provide value to the employers in the region so that they can understand the inflows and outflows of the potential employees, and understanding how willing somebody might be to commute from one area to another, one county to another. And so what's great about the On the Map website is it provides for all of these bullet points. So you can check the commuting distance, the average commute for an individual within a specific county. You can even check the distance and direction that they are traveling to and from. And in fact, in one of the slides that Haley presented, and I believe we'll see it in one of the next few slides here as well, we show the inflow and outflow to and from a specific county. So it's very high level data, but it's very useful if you understand why you're trying to access it in the first place. You can also break that inflow outflow data into age, earnings, and industry. You can look at the demographics and education characteristics of the people in those inflow outflow charts. And then lastly, you can also check firm and job characteristics within the region. So as with many other data sets that we access, and for those who are very familiar with accessing publicly available data, especially data collected by the government, there does tend to be a lag period. So for the on the map data, 2022 was the most recent data set. So I think it should still be quite representative. You know, we have that post-COVID transition where the first few years following the pandemic saw a lot of change within the labor market, but we've also seen quite a bit of stabilization from, I would say, 2022 and onward. There's been a lot of stabilization. So if you were to access this data now, I would still feel that it's quite representative of where things stand in 2024 and even into 2025. But again, unfortunately, we are at the mercy of the government for when they release that data, as well as when they conduct the census data for providing this resource. Now, as we speak about this resource specifically, where the government is able to produce that data for us, they use the LEHD, Origin Destination Employment Statistics. So that's another giveaway that we are working with government data, is that we have an acronym within an acronym. So the LEHD stands for the Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics. So the full descriptor would be Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics, Origin Destination Employment Statistics. And so we can skip that mouthful. We'll just call it the loads data. If you were to access this, and it is linked within the On the Map website, it would take you to another page where you could access various loads databases that you could download and manipulate for yourself. The 2020 census blocks are what is currently the most current data available on the website. And again, because it allows us to illustrate inflows and outflows from within a certain county or even a specific geographic area, all the way down to zip code and city, I believe. Because it's using census blocks, that allows us to look at state level data on workers and employers. So this was another illustration of the graph that I believe we saw previously, where we can see the number of commuters going into an area versus the number who are leaving the area for work every day. So in this particular illustration, within the city of Detroit, you have 51,963 workers who live and work in the city of Detroit. You have 165,000 who are commuting into Detroit from outside the city geographic limits, and then 118,000 who live in Detroit and commute out of the city of Detroit proper for their work every single day. So it makes for some really interesting comparisons. If you wanted to, I believe, Alicia, maybe you can confirm with a head nod. I'm not sure if we have the commuting pattern reports, those full reports available on the winintelligence.org website. So I'm getting a confirmation. If you wanted to check those out in further detail, we have them broken down by county. You'll see a lot of these charts, so it should look very familiar. But that's just another element of the research that WIN does over and above the labor market reports. So we are most well known within the data team here at WIN for producing the labor market reports, but we have so many other projects that we have our hands in, and that's just another element, another thing that you can check into that provides really granular data that you can utilize to better understand inflows and outflows, employment patterns, and other things that are useful for measuring that type of data. Looking at the quarterly report, I want to make sure we're good on time here. I think we are, so I'm going to go ahead and open up the next report. I know that you can't see that on the screen yet, but we are going to also be releasing the Q4 2024 quarterly reports for the WIN region and city of Detroit, as well as the annual labor market reports for all 19 counties within the WIN region and the state of Michigan. Those should all be released within probably the next month to month and a half. We typically target May 2020 of whatever year we're ending in as our release date. So I think we may be slightly ahead of schedule this year, so you can keep an eye out for those notifications that Alicia mentioned early in the meeting. We will let everybody know when the reports are finalized and published, but that typically tends to be our target date for publishing the quarterly and annual reports for the end of the year. And then, as I mentioned previously, we're very much looking forward to getting into the real meat and potatoes of these reports at the next meeting. So with that being said, I'm going to advance the slide, and then we'll quickly jump over to one of those labor market reports. So if you'll bear with me just a moment, I can get that other screen pulled up and we can take a look at one. So I know Haley had an opportunity to cover the first several pages of these. I want to save a little bit of content for the next meeting. So this is going to be just very high level overview. So the Q3 reports, of course, encompass July to September data from 2024. And I also wanted to show that if you were interested in some of the other reports, you can navigate to those going up to the Data and Research tab on the newly designed or redesigned rather Workforce Intelligence Network website. And a quick shout out to Alicia and the team that she worked with. We think the new website design is fantastic. It's very user-friendly, very easy to find what you're looking for. I know I mentioned that the data team does a lot of work with other types of data products. So we have career pathways, career profiles. There's the apprenticeship ROI calculator that used to get a lot of attention. I do indeed see the commuting pattern reports here. And then the data request form, which I'll circle back to in the last slide of the presentation, but you can go to the labor market reports tab to see all of the most recent reports. That's going to be the latest annual reports from 2023, as well as the quarterly reports from Q3, which we're looking at here. So a lot of this data is probably going to look familiar. We have several charts that Haley presented earlier in the presentation. We also provide additional context. So it makes a little more sense. Again, a lot of this data, especially if you're not familiar with workforce data and statistics, can be a lot to ingest all at once. That's why we would encourage everybody to take, maybe a few hours between now and the next meeting to skim through, get an idea for what makes sense, but better yet, get an idea for what you have questions about so that we can help you better understand these reports, and maybe we can look for opportunities to improve the reports as well. I know Haley's put in a lot of time and effort, as well as Alicia, into redesigning these reports lately, because we are always interested in maximizing the user experience here at WIN. So the next iteration of reports is going to be even better than what we see here. But of course, if you have questions going into that next meeting, having a chance to review these reports in depth is going to be very helpful for us to understand where the sticking points are and how we can possibly clarify that in future iterations of the report. So I won't go too much into detail. We saw these images earlier for the annual labor market information, the quarterly employer demand overview. We'll take a quick look at some of the next slides. I know a lot of this looks familiar, but everything ties into each other in some form or another. So looking at the previous slide, we had the breakdown of the total labor market, or excuse me, the total labor force, as well as employment and unemployment. Here we have further breakdowns at the quarterly labor market data level. We have the most in-demand education levels, the top occupation groups. And what's really interesting to me, I know when I first started developing these reports, is looking at the differences from one county to another and seeing how those various counties stack up to each other in terms of what occupations are most concentrated in those areas. And then that you can also take that and extrapolate it from the commuting pattern reports to help understand why some people are commuting from one area to another. It might be that in the area where they live, the customer service occupation is very high in demand, but perhaps they work in construction. So you may have a lot of construction workers commuting out of this area and into an adjacent county. So everything ties together at some level, and that's why we provide so much information in these reports to really help everybody understand the ins and outs and to help answer whatever the why question is for them. So think about what your why is and what some of the lingering questions are that you may have following the review of this. And I think a lot of this is going to be review. We did see many of these charts. Again, if you want to get into more detail with the commuting patterns, you can look at those commuting pattern reports, the job postings by city, the top occupations, both for all occupations as well as those that require 2 or fewer years of experience. One thing that is very helpful to see is the employment over time graphs that we provide. You will see if you go through one of the reports that provides for all 11 occupations, so that would either be the city of Detroit or the WIN region or state of Michigan, you'll see that a lot of these industries recovered following the pandemic. Almost exclusively, every single occupation group showed a pretty significant decline during 2020, and then most of them recovered within 1 to 2 years. I think IT is one that comes to mind that did not fully recover in the post-pandemic timeframe. So it's interesting to see how some of these occupation groups have their own nuances. So with something like this, with agriculture, we see a very male predominant representation in the worker gender demographics. A lot of the age groups, you're going to see many similarities, but gender tends to be one of those areas where we have a lot more distinction, as well as the time series data from one occupation group to the next. We've already seen the wage tables, so I won't go into further detail there. We have the top posted occupations within each of the occupation groups. And then this is one that we get a lot of questions on, are the very tail end of each occupation level grouping, where we provide for the in-demand technical skills, the foundational skills. A lot of people refer to those as soft skills. We also provide the top 5 in-demand certifications based on employer job postings. And then we also give you the top job postings by city the top posting employers for that occupation group, and then a nice breakdown of the in-demand education level. So again, pretty high level overview. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because we want to save some of this for the next time. But each occupation group that follows for the remainder of the report is just going to be rinse and repeat. So if you feel like you have a very good understanding of the layout for a single occupation group, you can then take that and extrapolate it across the remainder of the occupation groups, because the layout does not change from one to the next. The only thing that changes are the group in which we are measuring. So we can see just a very quick look at business and finance here. There was a 1.3% increase from 2023. That represents 4,084 workers. We have a much more even distribution of male to female, very low representation of the youngest age group, 14 to 24. And so again, looking at how all of this data relates to each other piece within the report is very helpful. I'll do a quick flip through a lot of these other ones, but again, the main takeaway here is we want you to have at least a rudimentary understanding of many of the definitions that we use throughout the report so that you can understand what we are showing and why. And then we want you to be able to ask those educated questions when you come back for the next iteration. So I'll go ahead and pause there. And I do want to make sure I get back over to the correct presentation screen. I believe the
Kevin?
last piece here. Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as you're pulling that up, the flip book that Kevin just went through is very mobile friendly, as well as, computer user experience friendly. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can share, you can do a lot of things with that. So don't be discouraged if you're like sending that to someone or showcasing it on your phone. If you know the page that you're looking for, you can really flip to it quite fast and zoom in and show people. I was just doing that on Tuesday. So a lot of great information at your fingertips, and hopefully a good user experience. And if not, please let us know, because we'd like to make sure it is a good user experience.
Yes, absolutely. And, I mentioned that Alicia did so much work behind the scenes. In fact, a lot of the WIN team does a ton of work behind the scenes that it might seem small in nature, but over time, we really are trying to optimize for the experience so that anybody who has questions, they're able to ask questions in a context that is meaningful to us, so that at the end of the day, we are providing something of value. That's really the key objective for all of us at the end of the day, is that we are providing value back to the communities that we serve. And so that's very near and dear to all of us. So we hope you appreciate all those smaller efforts, even though a lot of them go under the radar. But yeah, just to wrap things up, again, we've demonstrated a lot of the different reports, a lot of the customized work that we do. I would say on an average basis, the data team gets 1 to 2 customized data requests at least every other week. Sometimes it can be weekly. Sometimes we will get 5 in a single week. So it really depends on what employers are looking for, what institutions are looking for. We work with colleges, we work with Michigan Works agencies, we work with the general public, we provide data to other research teams. So there really isn't a limitation to what we can provide so long as we have access to it. So I know we spoke about accessing census data, accessing employment data, using Lightcast. So if there's anything employment related or skills related, employer demand related, we have a few examples here on screen of things that we receive common requests for, but you can use that QR code on the screen to navigate to the form. You can also just navigate to winintelligence.org/private-data-request-form. And so you can do it that way. And on the very last slide, we're going to give you an email address as well. So if you forget where to access this, if you lose track of the presentation after we send this out, don't hesitate to reach out to us via email as well. So if you have our direct email address, you're more than welcome to use that. This email address will first go to Alicia. You can also send one directly to the WIN data team, and you can find us on the website just by navigating over to data and research and filling out that form. So lots of different options to provide for the community needs. And with that being said, that's the end of today's presentation. So we'll go ahead and take questions.
Kevin, I also just want to mention too that everyone on this call is obviously part of the WIN board member organizations. So with that being said, those data requests are free or no cost for you guys. So if we're missing something that you really need when you meet with a partner or stakeholder, whatever it may be, please let us know. And that's where that data request form really comes in handy. Yeah, we're happy to pull anything for you. Again, this is a free service that your board, your directors have in a sense, allowed you to use. I guess, I don't know. All I'm saying is you're part of the inner circle with WIN, and please don't think that, you can't use this. This is definitely a forum for you guys.
Absolutely. Thanks,
Great.
Alicia. Yep, we are a resource and we like to provide value. So appreciate that last piece there, Alicia. I cannot see if we have questions in the chat. So if there's any for me, Alicia or Haley, if you want to field them to me, if you have questions for Alicia or Haley, feel free to direct them to either of them. So we'll go ahead and open it up.
Great. And everyone can, raise your hand or come off mute too if you'd like to ask a question instead of typing it. I know labor market can be extensive at times. So let us know if you have any questions. Now's your chance. And as we're wrapping up, we just have about a few, like 10, 15 more minutes together. And then the next time we will see some of you, not all of you, but some of you, we will be in person on June 10th, again at SEMCA Michigan Works in Taylor. As you are still thinking about those questions, please feel free to cut me off, but just letting everyone know that is when we will see you next. And then the last session will be virtual on September 15th, I believe it is. And it will be the same link that we used today, but emails will be sent. So no worries about that. All right, we'll give it a few more seconds, see if anyone has any questions. Thanks, Mara. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully you got something out of this too. Don't feel like this is crazy overwhelming. I mean, it is, and it's okay to feel that way, but like we're here to support you guys. And I can't promote the need for labor market data as we go and we meet with people and show them like these are problems, or these are the target gaps, or these are the solutions. We can do that together. The best way to do it together is, all together. So perfect. Christina, thank you. All right. If I don't hear any questions or anything else, you want to raise your hand if you have one. All right. If not, we will let everyone get on their way. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time. This recording with the PowerPoint will be sent to you as well. And feel free to share it widely. Like I said, these resources are at no cost to you guys. So please use them. And as always, we are here to answer any of your questions. We look forward to seeing you at the next meeting and in person, hopefully as well. Thanks a bunch, everyone. Have a wonderful Thursday. Stay warm, as I know it's snowing in a lot of different areas in the state. Take care.